Hello and welcome everyone to today's episode of Beyond the Buy Box podcast. This is a really exciting one. We have Laura Briggs joining us from all the way across the other side of the pond from me. And I love that our audience has become so big and very global. For those of you who've not had a chance to cross paths with Laura, she is a powerhouse in the digital commerce realm. She is an executive that has been in this space for several years, worked with some very, very big CPG conglomerates like Philips, Lornamead, Bounce Foods, and many, many brands underneath those organizations. And I'm excited to have you zoom in with us and tell us all about your experiences in navigating the fun world of digital commerce. And when you and I first connected, I shared with you part of my ambition for this global community is really to kind of dive in deep. Many of the discussions that we have are sharing kind of hacks, tricks of the trade, the bumps, the failures, and things that you learn. So, long setup just to say, Laura, I'm super pumped to have you today.
Thanks very much for inviting me, Jen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Maybe we can just dive right in and thinking across all of your experiences. You've worked with some really big powerhouse brands in a variety of seats from running local business to global capability building, in any of the roles that you've had. Maybe if you can share any particular top challenges as it relates to going to market on a marketplace, open marketplace, it's sort of a free for all, like the Amazons of the world. What have you found in building these capabilities, driving growth, have posed the biggest challenges in your experience?
I mean, I think you touched upon it in the question there, Jen. It's an open marketplace, right? And I think what digital has done is it has just accelerated and made visible and kind of put a loudspeaker onto things that we always saw. I think one of the biggest challenges that I've experienced is that these marketplaces become just a really solid income for bad actors. So whilst we are larger brands or smaller brands, acting as brands on these marketplaces, there are also people trading from their garages or elsewhere that can make a really good living on these platforms. And sometimes they are incredibly agile and they can do that and disrupt kind of things for shoppers and for brands on the platforms. So whilst I was at Philips, this sort of entrepreneurial approach that they have, you're a big organization, you're trying to keep pace with the changes, and they are so creative with how they can find ways through to make that little business for themselves on those platforms. So we experienced all sorts of things, real small scale, really big scale counterfeit operations, things like end of life stock being relabeled, hijacking of PDPs where perhaps we had discontinued a product, so all the history was there. So I think that is, it's so disruptive. It's disruptive for you commercially as a brand, but it's also really disruptive for your shoppers on the platform. And I think that's the bigger thing that's a challenge for me is, I've also experienced it as a consumer trying to buy product. And I think the other thing is, as these marketplaces are so automated and so tech driven, that you're not able to necessarily give that feedback in the way that you might want to either. So that's something else where brands see consumer feedback showing up in ratings and reviews because there's nowhere else for them to air their concerns about this, counterfeit product or not quite the right thing that they were expecting, because these bad actors are operating in that same space as brands.
So many things that I can also relate to coming from, legacy change, a consumer world, and the speed and the agility. And, there's a level of creativity that can come along with some of these resellers who act on your behalf, that some are doing things that are hugely disruptive, can be in some cases dangerous, but just super detrimental. But others, when they game the system or things like price erosion and all of that gets really challenging. I'm curious if there's any particular gathering the learnings and taking in building plans that account for this disruption maybe if you can share any particular examples or situations where you've built the plan. You've built the plan to account for all of these variables and factors, and maybe part of the plan went, but then still plan didn't quite go as you had wanted. Because part of this is, how do you take action? The attempts of the Philips of the world or the Lornameads to be agile still won't be quite as agile as a reseller selling out of the garage. But I'm curious if you've, some interesting things, but still didn't quite deliver as you had planned, but learnings nonetheless that you wouldn't have learned any other way.
Yeah, and I think we have to be careful to make the distinction right. There's authorized resellers. So there's companies acting on your behalf as a brand that you kind of have given the right to play in that space. And then there are also this whole raft of, sell on that can create a little bit more disruption. But I think for me, do you ever really have a plan on digital commerce and marketplaces? That would be my one question. There is so much always happening. It's such a dynamic space because of the algorithms of the platform. We often set out with a plan. I'm not sure we ever end up fully executing on it because things evolve and move. And a marketplace like Amazon is pitching their pricing based on price matching. And the rules that they have around that can vary greatly. So I think one of the things that we've historically in businesses that I've worked on always look to do is to try to think about how do we design portfolio so that we can, serve the needs of different channels and try to manage that overall landscape to the benefit of shoppers and customers and brands. It's not challenging because with free movement of stock, things shuffle and move around. But I think keeping an eye on the data whilst you're going through that evolution is really what I've tried to instill in teams and try to make that as actionable as possible, because digital is a space where you are drowning in data. It's a blessing and a curse, right? We've got loads and loads of data, fantastic, but what are we actually going to do with it? So really understanding how to translate it, what the data means, what things to look at, what things to perhaps not look at that are less important at any one time. And if you're keeping an eye on those things and managing it in a dynamic way, it allows you to navigate those changes as they come. So if you start to see a drop off in traffic, what might be driving the drop off in traffic? Can you see elsewhere? Do you have data about context? Is it competitor pages that are getting that traffic rather than yours? Is it overall category traffic that's a problem? If you can start to try to unpack those things, then whatever plan you have, at least you can understand what's influencing that plan and how you need to course correct against it.
I love that. And it's a prioritization and not being distracted by the breadth of what you have in front of you, which I love how you articulate it. Like, a plan is a plan, but in this world of digital commerce, it lasts for how long? And the other thing that I really love inherently in your reminder on using the data to diagnose, but understand and having the context to where the plan might be going awry, but also not being distracted by all the things that actually don't matter. You take your eye off of focusing on what the data is actually inherently telling you and getting the right lens and keeping the team and yourself kind of focused on that. I feel like helps to move
Yeah.
forward just a little bit. Yeah. I know that we all kind of came into this space in digital in one way or another. How has your upbringing and how you came into this space impact how you lead today?
Ooh. I mean, I always class myself as a marketeer at heart, but my very first jobs were actually in sales and they were in like telesales. So as soon as I found my heartland in marketing, I'd always come to that knowing what it was like to drive commerce and to be in front of a customer and be having that conversation with them. So I think that always gave me a slightly different lens on how I went about things in my marketing career. I think being in the digital commerce and the e-commerce space, those two functions, they just have to work together. Coming back to the algorithm, there are aspects of that algorithm that are very commercially driven and that the sales team or the revenue teams are responsible for. There are other aspects of it that are very marketing driven, like content, and that whole team really needs to work together. And I think for me, the role of the leaders then are in being the captain of the team and bringing everybody together. What are those shared goals? How are we going to work together? What data are we going to look at? How are we going to make it meaningful? And also understanding how everyone shows up in those conversations, because exactly like you just said, everyone comes from their own perspective and point of view. And if you can understand in leading those teams the pieces that people understand, the pieces that they maybe don't understand, and help to create that common understanding across everybody, that's really what makes it powerful and allows people to collaborate. And I think collaboration is just not optional at all in this space. You have to work together as a team sport.
Oh, very much so. And arguably, probably more so than many other channels. Not to say that collaboration isn't key in other channels, but what came top of mind in our, the first question, that it's inherently such a superpower that you kept the shopper and the consumer experience still very front and center as you think about challenge and disruption. I'll kind of out myself that I have been kind of down the sales path. I grew up in, where sales came into the marketing arena and then digital commerce. And so I find myself being one of those folks. It's like, maniacal about like, okay, well, what's the growth? What's the margin? And having done this now for several years, sitting, now agency side, but prior to CPG side, always reminding myself the value of how someone is experiencing what you're putting out there, or how partners that you trust and want to represent your brand. So it's fascinating. And I agree that kind of as a center point and the team kind of captain of the ship, the importance of getting everyone to connect and think about where somebody might not be thinking through and
Yeah.
contributing in that way.
I mean,
So big.
exactly like you and I showing up to this conversation. You can have a team and there's one person in there that's very sales background, very great. In fact, I've had that in teams that I've led, thinking very much on that sales axis. And actually, for me, they're so intertwined. One is the effect of the other in a way. If you can get one piece right, the other will follow. So it's bringing those perspectives together.
Yeah, absolutely. And, maybe in thinking about the audience, a lot of folks who've joined the community sit in a lot of different roles and listening ears to, discussions. If you could leave our guests with a few nuggets and tips, tricks of the trade, if you had to take action in the next 30 days to give something a try or remind folks to not forget about doing certain things, like all in spirit of holding on to all of the hard work that goes behind building a business, building a brand, and kind of maintaining the integrity of like what we're trying to build together.
Yeah, I think it's so fast paced. We haven't used the AI words yet, but I'm going to throw them in the last minute.
Wonderful.
I think there's so much going on. And this year, we've just seen the pace of change increase even more so. It's very easy to go chasing after things. I think what I always try to ground myself in and encourage others to ground themselves in is making sure your foundations are really solid. Because, we can go chasing audience on digital, but actually, if we don't have the right things in place, if we haven't managed those challenging situations that we have on marketplaces and make sure that we have that solid foundation and that we're driving profitable growth, we've got a solid consumer experience, the product is in stock, those basic
Yeah.
things, then actually you're always plugging a leaky bucket in a way. So I think that's the piece that I would always say is think about, have you got all of that foundation there in a really solid place? Do you understand the tools that are available to you? Are you using them to the maximum of their ability? Because those pieces are what really counts. They might not always be the most exciting bit.
It's such a great point you just made in that last breath of they're oftentimes not the most exciting things,
Yeah.
but the most critical. Those are the things that make a superpower brand, is having the fundamentals in place and, having the right infrastructure. I think it's a great point in knowing what tools and how to, you could still get scale and leverage technology and process to get the foundation in order and hold the line and then kind of tackle the next things.
We can't ignore those things, right? They're going to keep coming, they're going to keep disrupting, and they to some extent affect what we need to do in the foundation as well. So, yeah, keeping an eye on both. AI is an and job, not an or job, is kind of where my head is at. We've just got more to do. It's making things more complicated.
Yeah. Awesome. Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate your advice and sharing your view of kind of the messy middle that can happen in this world of digital commerce and just sharing your experiences. It's been fantastic.
You're very welcome. It's been lovely chatting with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks.